Hey, thanks so much for joining us today for this third webinar in a series about the CIS Top 20 in a remote workforce. Really glad you could be here today. My name is Greg Hodges, and I am the Vice President of Sales here at Vigilant. And Chris Nyheis, who is our CEO, he's also our founder, will be sharing with you today about that topic. And like I said, this is the third iteration, the third webinar in this series. And if you happen to be on and this is your first one, don't feel like you've missed out. You have missed some terrific content, but we can make those previous two webinars available to you via recording. So just reach out to myself or whoever it is that you're working with regarding Vigilant, and they'll make sure you get access to those recordings so you can get caught up to speed with what we're talking about. So today in webinar number 3, we'll continue that dialogue. We're working through those top 20, the CIS top 20. Taking a couple of those every time we get together, unpacking them, talking about how you might begin to apply those in your organization, and also just talking about some things that we're seeing in the world today. Over the last couple webinars, we've looked at some real interesting threats and incidents that have happened with companies and unpacked those and talked about maybe how some different security things might have kept those more limited than they were. And so we're doing that part of what you're here for in just a few minutes. But before then, I want to take just an opportunity and introduce you to Vigilant's newest team member. He is our CISO, and his name is Jeff Warman. Jeff comes to us from a pretty good heritage, pretty good pedigree in the cybersecurity world. We're really excited to have him be part of the team. He formerly was with Target, who you might have known about or heard about regarding an incident that they had that made a lot of news around the world. And he was with them as they kind of dealt with that and put some things in place to hopefully never deal with that again. So he's an exciting member of our team. Jeff, thanks for taking time to be with us today. I wanted everyone to get a chance to meet you. And just kind of related to, you've been exposed to a lot of things in the world where you have a lot of great titles behind your name, but what are some things happening in the world today, maybe some industry trends that would be important for some of our customers to keep their mind around as they're heading into this third quarter of the year?
No, that's definitely a very timely question, Greg. There's a number of things that we could talk about. I know we only have a few minutes here, but I think some of the big things, obviously, when those of us watch the news or talking around the office, all the just political and economic things going on across the world, but specifically between the East and the West, I think that has definitely led to an increased amount of security threats. I think you add into that some of the other things that we've been seeing with the shift to even that much more of a remote workforce with some of the very targeted phishing and spear phishing, which then leads to an increased amount of ransomware. So I'd say ransomware has definitely risen to a crisis level. We've had a number of prospective customers come to us dealing with that very issue. The cyber crime is obviously taking advantage of this as well in terms of some of the business email compromises, whether again via phishing or very targeted phishing, or even if you've heard of it, some of the deep fake attacks, like, hey, if I can use AI and machine learning and all the other buzzwords to try to target my attacks. So that would be, you might have heard some of the stories where they would go after and impersonate a CFO, right? I'm going to say, how do I intercept that payment channel? How do I get them to wire me funds, trying to trick people. And so it's really that next level of social engineering. So that's definitely something we've been seeing an increasing amount of, this year. I would also say that because of these increased attacks, it's even highlighting the fact that the cybersecurity skills gap just only continues to grow. So, how are we going to handle these increased amount of threats and new threats and just that constant cat and mouse game with threat actors? So that's where, a lot of the platforms, a lot of the vendors are, how do we add data science? How do we integrate that into security, whether it's through automation, whether it's through just, being more agile and nimble with some of the controls that we implement within our companies. And so that's where you'll see a lot more of that, I think, with vendors talking about machine learning, talking about AI, both the cyber attack side and the defense side. I think it's that kind of arms race between the attackers and the defenders for sure. And then I would also say that, data is, again, you've seen that with breaches, you've seen that with leaks. Data is definitely something that out there on the dark web and on the the market, right? Data has a value based on, is it, personally identifiable information? Is it credit card numbers? Is it PHI, the health information? There's, each of those records has a dollar value associated with it. And that value is far less volatile than, even the stock market or cryptocurrency or any of those things. So that's where a lot of the cyber criminals and, the operators on the dark web, they want to deal in data and the number of records that they can buy and sell. So that's where, again, the attacks on companies are only going to intensify, and it's not going to be, they're not going to discriminate whether you're a small business or whether you're a big business. If they can get in and get some, juicy, valuable data out of your company, they're definitely going to try and do that.
Yeah, I know. Back when this whole COVID thing started, we were doing a webinar. Chris was doing a webinar maybe in April or late April, early May, and was talking about, he was calling it the second wave. And I know you mentioned early on that ransomware is currently at almost a crisis level. And that's what we saw as the coming reality that a lot of people are facing today. And like you said, we had just over the last month, 10, 12, maybe 15 prospects, people who weren't our customers, who were calling, getting hit with that second wave of ransomware. Some of them had even heard about a little bit about Vigilant before, didn't take advantage of that. But it really is almost at it's the epidemic that's crisis. That's part of the epidemic, that we're facing in the world today with COVID. It's at nutty levels. So yeah, I wanted you to get a chance to hear from Jeff. Those of you who are current Vigilant customers, great resource now that's been added to our team. It's been around for going on 3 months now. And he leads up all of those teams that you're familiar with, the analysts, the people that are doing the hunting through the data, the reverse malware engineers, anyone that's dealing with the threat data that we're watching, those endpoint engineers that are watching things on your endpoints. He leads all of those teams, and you'll be hearing from him more and more. So Jeff, thanks for jumping on. I want to kick it over now to Chris. Chris Nyheis, like I said, is our CEO. He is going to be sharing with us webinar number 3. In the CIS Top 20 in a remote workforce. So it looks like he's in the studio now and ready to roll. Chris, I'll shoot it over to you.
All right, so good stuff. So we're gonna jump right in. Like we've been talking about this, what we call our Security Expert Series, and what we're doing is going through the CIS Top 20. Very different angle on the CIS Top 20. Most organizations jump in, and just as a recap for those of you who've been here already, but and this is a recap for people that haven't, but the CIS Top 20 is generally approached by most organizations as this behemoth thing that they're trying to pull off, and it generally takes a really long time to deploy. The effects of the security tools and the controls are way far off, and on top of it, it ends up costing significantly more than if you had just stepped through iteratively, and that's what we're talking about in this series. So, all right, so let's jump in. A little bit on me, if you don't know who I am. I'm the CEO of Vigilant, been in the IT industry now for 24 years. I'm a pilot, very passionate about orphan care. It's one of the tenets of Vigilant. Actually, we outwardly support orphan care organizations with 25% of our profit and have since the very day we opened business. I'm an author as well. We have a book coming out later this year, and have held CIO and C-level director roles inside organizations, both in the automotive industry, SCADA control and food distribution organizations. And one of the organizations I actually worked for, Warehouse, this financial database that we had to protect every day, that if you purchase a car in the United States, you're in it. And so learned a lot through my career, and in just defending organizations through Vigilant. And we love to share that information just outwardly. Not intelligence, because we keep that internally. We don't want to let threat actors know what we know about them, but we do want to share different things, both from a thought standpoint, strategy, and tactical standpoint, that can help organizations change their mindset and make themselves more efficient at security and just really keep themselves safer. So that's why the Cybersecurity Expert Series is really just to equip customers. This isn't a Vigilant commercial at all. We love to keep these very educational. Now, at the end, Greg will jump through and talk about our customer portal. We do have customers on this call, and we have people that are not customers on this call, but it'll give you a chance to see a quick portal walkthrough, some of the new features that we've just deployed just recently that have enhanced the ability for our customers to be able to get information on a very timely basis about themselves. Today, we're going to go through the CIS Top 20, steps 5 and 6. So if you're interested in things to do from steps 1 to 4, we have 2 other videos that are out there. Reach out to us. We can send those links to you. Put in the chat window if you would like to receive those links, and we'll get those to you pretty quickly. One of the interesting things about any type of framework that you deploy in your organization, it usually comes with this massive price tag, and it doesn't always move your the bar farther down the road very quickly. The way that we approach it, like I said earlier, is an iterative approach. And so it allows you to go through this series, through these top 20 controls, and just make small changes that make big effect changes within the security of your organization. And if you go back and watch those other 2 videos, the 4 things that we talked about already are things you could do very simply, very quickly within your organization, and really just do them at really not much cost other than just a little bit of time from your team. So that's going to be true again about steps 5 and 6 today. And 5 a little bit, maybe a little bit of cost, but 6 you can definitely carry out without it. So let's jump forward. We already talked about those, and a little bit about Vigilance too. We're an elite team. We protect organizations, keep them in business. We know and understand warfare, like it says. Our team is very focused on keeping our customers in business. We privately held, we don't have any outside shareholders, which helps us to really focus on what matters most to our customers. We don't have to focus on anyone else's value other than our customers' value. And that's been very successful for us. So CIS Top 20. Recap on it. What is it? It's this framework of 20 actionable steps that companies can take to protect themselves. Now, it improves security mindset and awareness within your organization, and it drives an organizational focus towards security. Why that's important is because it's a checklist, and it's a thing that you can work your way down, and it's a journey. And that's the important part, right? Security is a journey. You got to remember that. It's not something that it's no out destination in the future. There's not this thing where, 10 months from now, we'll finally be secure. Now, you have to be able to make decisions now, today, that can help move you down the path of security. And it builds on top of itself. And the earlier you get on that path of building that up, the more secure you will be when bad things happen, right? Especially globally, right? There's a lot of organizations that were not prepared for remote workforce. There's a lot of organizations that are not prepared for what threat actors are doing right now with ransomware, taking companies down. But if you're able to start iteratively moving forward down this journey, you'll be more and more prepared each day. And that will make you effective when bad things happen, right? So a couple considerations, back on the recap still, helps your organization overcome skills gaps because you can start to see where things overlap, helps you identify regulations that you may or may not know you need. It leads to understanding current events, which is really important, and how to react to them, and even how to pre-act to them, if you will. Be ready before bad things happen. And it helps you save time, and it helps you save money if you do it right. If you don't, you're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money, right? Any compliance path can be very, very expensive if not done right. And in a lot of cases, you got to go back and redo it because you may do the wrong stuff. And security inside your organization, like I said, it's a journey. It should not be a static thing. It should not be based on a technology. It should be based on knowledge about yourself inside your organization, so that it becomes this continuous loop of evaluation. And at face value, most of the security industry is already behind. We talked about last week or 2 weeks ago about the IBM report that came out that said that it's now 315 days on average for the industry to identify a threat inside an organization and contain it. 315 days. That's crazy. That's up by over 100 days from last year. So that has to tell you something, is that mainstream security is being spent, tons of money is being spent on it, but it's not very effective, right? Our customers experience a much different approach to that, minutes to hours, and on average, right? And that's insane, right? Insanely change, from a difference of 315 days. So, and from a contextual standpoint, again, as we're talking through this, always remember that the security operates on a timeline. So if a threat actor enters in at 12 o'clock, that means, and you start doing something new today, right? And statistically, that's very likely for most organizations. Statistically, you do start doing something today, that thing has to be able to be operationally ready very quickly. In most cases, a lot of things you put in place, firewalls, rules, audits, things like that, take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. That means that a threat actor can be in your environment for up to 9 months, sometimes before what you just put in even has the possibility of detecting them. And when you add on that 315 days on average, that means anything you make operational, the moment it's operational, is generally going to be 315 days before it's effective, just for what's happening today. Now, tomorrow, it's going to be another 315 days. A month, be another 315 days. So start to do the math, and the things that most organizations are doing to become quite ineffective. Another aspect of context as we talk about 5 and 6 today is this idea that we've been talking about, that security is iterative, right? So you want to constantly look and observe, and then orient, and then decide, and then act. Then you go back into it. What did we just do? Observe if it worked, observe what's going on now, then orient, then decide, and then act. You want to constantly go through this process as an organization. It's one of the things we do for our customers every day. It's one of the things that your security teams have to be doing as well. So that way you can make educated decisions on what's happening right now and make effective moves within your organization to make sure that the threats don't take over. So decisions have to be part of your everyday and every week and every month, every quarter, every year decision-making around cybersecurity. And it must be driven by knowledge about you. It can't be driven by knowledge about the industry. So your industry top 10 lists and your threat indicators and how other companies are getting attacked, that's a little bit of information. But it's not going to affect you, because generally most of the information is a year old anyway. But you have to make decisions on what's happening right now. So top 20, we're not going to read through them all. You can see in yellow 5 and 6, those are the ones we're going to talk about today. It's broken up into 3 sections. The first section is basic controls. The second section is foundational. We call this kind of, the first one is kind of knowing yourself. The next one is knowing your attacker and some tactics. Foundational continued. And then you have the last 4, which are organizational tactics. So the thing to understand, like we say this every week, most companies start with these 4. However, they're the least effective ones to start with. And so really, as you're developing your security programs, really kind of pump the brakes a little bit and think about where you want to start with your security programs, right? How do you want to protect yourself? These 4 things are nice and they're shiny because you get some cool reports and they give you some information, but the thing that most of the things you're going to get from them are the least effective at giving you very surgical decisions to protect yourself today. So the first 2, we're going to talk about secure configuration for hardware and software on mobile devices, laptops, workstations, and servers. And then we'll talk about maintenance, monitoring, and audit of logs and analysis of logs. Now, this first iteration through the top 20, right? And we're on a journey together, is about making decisions that help you know yourself, and then making small tweaks that you can make very quickly inside your organization, making very small tweaks to the mindset of the people on your team, as well as your leadership, who may or may not be technical, but making just a couple changes through this first iteration. And you'll find that through this entire journey of these first 20, you will not spend very much money at all, and you will see effective things in place that will protect you today. And then you'll go through it again, and we'll do another journey through, and we'll bump it up a notch. It'll be this continuous iterative journey together to protect yourselves and just to make small decisions about today. Now, as we've talked before, we'll weave in some security stories, what's happening in the industry, From sake of time today, we're not going to talk about a breach. We will talk about one in 2 weeks, but we're going to dig into these two. So to sum all that up, if you remember any of that stuff that I just talked about, right? The first one is know yourself. The most important thing. If you don't know yourself and know what makes you tick and know where your vulnerabilities are, and I'm not talking about what software is installed, but where attackers really attacking you right now. If you don't know what's at stake for your organization and you don't know what loss could mean, then you're not even starting to win the battle. So know yourself first. Know your enemy, right? Learn about them, right? Then create a short-term tactical plan to stop bleeding. And I'll tell you this, most organizations are bleeding. And you can see that because all these companies that you would thought would have tons of security, Intel, for instance, we talked about them 2 weeks ago, they were bleeding. And so if you're not as big as Intel and you don't have as much money you're spending towards cybersecurity and they were still bleeding, then you probably are as well. Implement an agile strategy. Now, most people think about strategies as very static. You can't do that in cybersecurity. You need to have an overarching strategy, right? But that strategy may need to change depending on what your threat's doing. And that's why it's important for step 2 to know your enemy. And then last, carry out an iterative tactical approach, right? And so you want to be able to carry out very surgical things, operations within your organization that can take out a threat or put a barrier in place or give you information to be better at making decisions next time. So first step. So every week we talk about 2 of these. This is the first one. First step, secure configuration for hardware and software on mobile, for mobile devices, laptops, and workstations. So I'm not one of those people that like to pop through, but try to stop yourself from reading ahead, right? Let's focus on one. And don't read ahead because you may miss something that's really important, right? About these steps. So 1, policy. These are 3 things you can do. This will cost you nothing inside your organization. However, it will stop a significant amount of threats, right? So if you have mobile devices, phones, laptops, things like that, put a policy in place and let your team, because this is how threat actors have been getting in during this remote workforce aspect of things, right? A lot of people have moved things to people's personal systems or whatever. Put a policy in place and just tell your employees, right? And you don't have to do a massive training. This shouldn't wait for your annual training or anything like that. But just put a policy in place that just says, if you have company email or data on a system, whether you own it or not, that you can't give your password to a family member or to a friend, right? To where they can't log in. And I mean, you can hand that device to someone. I mean, if you own that device, I'd even go so as far as to say, you can't even let it be unlocked without your supervision. And the reason for that is because people can download any apps, they can do all kinds of things with your phone. They can go to a website, they can get malware on that system, whether it's Android or iPhone or whatever, for it's your laptop, right? Protect those systems, protect those credentials, but put a policy in place and let your teams know not to share it, right? If even with your spouse, right? Because if there's company information on there, they may not understand what's at stake. Your spouse may not understand that because they may not, they're not an employee. They haven't heard you talk about what matters most. And so they may not have the same level of protection as that system, right? So put that policy in place and just let them know. Real easy thing. It falls under security configuration for hardware and software management devices. Now, when people see these steps of these security frameworks, they think that it's massive, that it's got to be this big boulder you have to move. It doesn't. You just have to start, right? Like we have companies call us up all the time and they say, hey, we're about to get audited. What are the things we should do before we get audited? And we're like, well, when are you getting audited? Well, 2 weeks from now. Like, well, you're probably going to, have a problem, right? But, with being ready, but what they're looking for in a lot of cases is, do you have basic things in place? And if not, then here's how you do it. But this mindset towards security, and are you stepping through these architectures? So just put that policy in place, add it to your policies. And check with your HR teams to make sure what your organization's policies are around those things, but just make sure that people know. Centralized authentication. Now, most companies have things like Active Directory, but we find that companies struggle to get Mac systems or other systems that are outside of that under management, right? And there's a lot of different pieces of software out there that you can spend money on. You can go that route. You can start doing what's called MDM software, platforms, so that you can, deploy authentication onto your systems. What you're really looking for in this case is some way to centrally manage your authentication across all your devices. Now, if you have Active Directory, you can integrate it with other things that are open source. There's a great one called IPA Server. You can deploy that for free within your organization. It just takes your team's time to deploy, or maybe you outsource someone to deploy it. It doesn't cost you a lot of money. But when you start to have things like centralized authentication, like Active Directory, IPA, then you can start to create policies that are automatic. So you can say, this can happen on this device or this can't. And you can start to put those policies in place. Where a lot of software comes in place is it's nice and shiny, and it's easy to configure, and that's great. But in a lot of cases, you already have a lot of the things in place in your organization already to be able to implement those things just a little bit, right? Just to take some steps. And what that does is in the timeline of security, if it takes you 6 months to deploy an MDM solution, or 3 months, right, with testing and things like that, well, just those small little tactical changes up front. Remember how we said here, short-term tactical plan to stop bleeding? That's what we're talking about here. Let's just stop some bleeding. Do a tactical plan, make some changes to your centralized authentication, and that will help you start to manage those devices a little bit. Now, that might take a little bit more time. It might take, from your team, but it's definitely worth it, because you can start to manage those systems, and you can do it at fairly low cost. And then that buys you time to be able to start going out and buying more, bigger packages on your next iteration through CIS Top 20. The third thing is deploy Exchange packages to mobile devices. So this is something that's, if you're using Office 365 or you're even using Exchange, which most companies do, one of those two, on-prem or Office 365, you can deploy packages to the devices that are out there. Phones, you can deploy the packages to laptops, you can deploy it to Android, to iPhone, whatever. And this is something we're going to actually offer help with. These packages are not expensive to do. They're actually to you, it's actually going to be free. You just have to build them. And it's a one-to-many thing. So we already have deployment scripts that are written. If you're an existing customer of ours, just reach out to your CRS agent. I'll tell you what these scripts do here in a second. Reach out to your existing CRS agent. On our team, they'll get you that script. If you're not an existing customer of ours, if you do a security audit with us, which Greg talked about last week, and the audit's completely free to you. It covers steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the CIS Top 20 and 6 that we'll talk about today. And it's free, right? It's a free audit. If you go through that audit with us, we'll actually add on giving you those scripts as well. So a pretty low cost way for you to accomplish some of those. You get to experience what we do for our customers every single day, and you get to use a script that will continue on to help you secure your organization. So what that does basically, though, that script, is it allows you to be able to deploy Exchange settings through certificates onto your mobile devices. This is something, if you have Office 365 or you have Exchange already built in, you can deploy those certificates to your endpoint systems. And if that phone gets lost, or that phone gets stolen, or that employee leaves, or whatever, you need to change something on their system, you can actually revoke that certificate remotely without having to require that device to be wiped, or that device to not, to still be able to connect, right? And it gives you a really inexpensive way to do a very organizational-wide change that gives you a lot more security over the email communications you have inside your organization. And it's free. And you just made a big step towards security in your organization. So pretty cool. How are we on time? Got it, 1:32. All right, so I think, yep, there we go. Okay, so 6, maintenance, monitoring, and analysis of logs. So the first part of this is back to knowing yourself. And it kind of has to go with knowing the technology that you use. So let me go ahead and pause the share here for a second. We're going to go up to the screen. And all right, so when I talk about this, and this has a, you know, if you do, we get to see how everything works, right? The way that we do what we do to protect our customers. And so it gives us some really good insight in how to protect those things or how to make those protections inside organizations better. So like last week, we talked about vulnerabilities, right? And updates, and when, you know, what is a good strategy to have around updates, and how do you protect yourself through updates? Now, when you look at this idea of logs, right? Of maintenance, monitoring, and analysis of logs. Well, when you look at that, one is maintenance is the collection, right? The management of it, the backing up of it, the storage of it, getting logs out of all the things, right? You find a lot of mistakes in this phase. You'll find, you know, companies, when they get hacked, they go, oh, they hacked in the one place we didn't have logs functioning correctly. And you're like, there's probably a lot more places, but you just know about that one place because that's how they used it, right? And so there's human error wrapped up inside this aspect of logs, right? There's limitations of technology wrapped up in those logs. You know, a lot of companies will pull logs off of their network traffic through span ports, for instance. Well, span ports, many people don't know this, but if you use a span port or a mirror port, you lose 20% of the data passing through there just by default. And if that switch or that system gets built up, you could lose 40%. Try reading 40% of a story, or 10% of a story, or even 1% of a story, or 60 or 80. I mean, any part of that story that's missing, your context is not going to be there. Try to find a threat with only 60% of the data or 80% of the data, right? And then we wonder why we have false positives or things like that. Then you have monitoring, right? And this is where you have automated alerting, aspects of that shoot logs, alerts out to people. You also have human error in that standpoint, right? You have the ability to miss things in there. And then the third step is analysis. And this is the most labor-intensive aspect of things. This is where you have to pare down all that information and you have to have people do analysis on it. And so, you have to have this ability to do all three things. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you think like a threat actor, right? They know that, and so when you're looking at the trustworthiness of logs, you have to look at how can a threat actor possibly manipulate my logs and the trustworthiness of the logs. We call it fidelity. So when you look at it, if I have a system here, and then I have my logging sim, right? Or I have just logs in general from operational aspect of things, right? And I have a server or even like a desktop, right? Well, if I'm a threat actor and I get on this system, right? Which we've talked about, is not that difficult. I get on that system, and once I'm on that system, well, all I have to do is do one thing. I can start to look, initially, what is this system communicating to, right? Threat actors are smart. They can look, they know what logs look like. They also know what log configs look like. So they can come in here and look and see, okay, well, is there a configuration on this box to send logs somewhere, right? You get into a firewall or a router, it's right there in the command line, right? So it tells you exactly where these SIMs are what their IP addresses are. It tells you also where your logs are. Now, in some cases, the configuration files will even tell you what type it is, right? What type of SIM. Threat actors can even look at the type of data being sent, which will tell them what type of SIM as well. So I'll tell you, inside post analysis of incident responses, you don't find a whole lot of information here that's going to help you initially. You just don't. Otherwise, IRs would go like that, right? Now, if we're doing IRs for organizations, we put technology in, we're looking at things much different, so we can find things faster, but you just don't generally find those very often inside those. So, but if you even look at this scenario, the threat actor already knows what and they know where, which are two very important things, right? Because now all they have to do, we've talked about how they can operate in different levels. They don't have to turn off all of your logs going to these locations. They just have to turn off some. And they just turn off, or they just manipulate what's being sent when it's about them, right? And now, if you're an organization that doesn't have remote logging and your logs are just here, well, now you're even in bigger trouble, because where there might be something here, then on this side, they just delete it and they get rid of it. And that really shuts it down, right? And so you just have to know that if you have logging, threat actor knows what, where, and they also can manipulate the data that's going to it. And what that means is now they're in the driver's seat and they can control what you do, because they can also add logs. So if they want to divert your entire team, they can be like, hey, let's send this log to the SIM and put them off on a wild goose chase. So that's why, if you're looking at logs because you're trying to identify, is my processor overloaded? What software is there? Whatever, right? That kind of stuff that's static, that's good, right? Logs used as logs that you get that are, that something's sending to you, right, may not be trustworthy. And so you can't make the actions your organizations take to defend yourself always based on those primarily. You have to have other means of doing that, because this could divert you off into a totally different direction. And that's a concern. So you got to understand the trustworthiness of logs. They're not very trustworthy. And you just got to make that paradigm shift in your organization. They just aren't. And that's okay. The reason, and there's other ways to handle it, the reason is because you have an intelligent threat actor over here trying to, they're very intelligent. They got pretty high IQs, right? They're smart. They're not dumb. And they know how to manipulate you this way. That's why companies, very, very large organizations, get it all the time, just like this. They know how to manipulate you, right? Now, a server, why did the industry think logs were good? Well, because logs told us a lot of really cool stuff back in the operation, even about our systems today. But a server never wakes up and is like, hey, I'm going to fool everyone today, and I'm going to make it look like my hard drive's full, but it's really not. Or I'm going to make it look like it's not, and it will be full, and the server will crash, and the OS goes down, ha, 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 right? The server doesn't do that. But a threat actor does wake up in the morning and go, how can I manipulate the logs to make them do something that I want them to do? That happens all the time. So first and foremost, understand the trustworthiness of logs. It's a huge paradigm shift, and it's a jump forward in the CIS top 20. Now, did you go check off all the things underneath it? No, but you changed your mindset to start going down the right path. Right, so let's go back and share back on the screen, if I can get it back. Zoom. All right, so understand trustworthiness logs. 2, know that the logs you create are better than the logs you receive. So you need to have the ability in your organization to create your own logs. And you need to make sure that the way at which you do that are done in a protective way that can't be manipulated. Because your log information or your threat information has to be the most trusted data in your entire organization. Absolutely the most trusted data. Even of your own data, right? Like it has to be the most trusted data because it's the one thing that if it's correct, right, you can make great decisions to protect everything else you do, right? And so, you know, and we're going to talk about on-prem. There's ways to do this in the cloud. There's ways to do this on endpoints. We're going to talk about on-prem at your locations, at your data centers today, right? And there's ways to do this on other aspects. Reach out. We could talk to you about that. Maybe we'll do another webinar on it one day. For sake of time, I just want to get the concept because security is about conceptual placement of information, right? And conceptual placement in strategic moves and decisions based off of these concepts. So we'll just draw a simple, whoops. Let's go ahead and put it in white here. We'll draw a simple network. We'll just do it in white because it's easy to see. So say this is your firewall, right? Now, if I want to pull logs from this firewall from a SIM standpoint, that's fine. I can pull them out. It's going to send over to my SIM, right? Now, again, are these very trusted? No. Why? Because someone can hack a firewall. It's been done over and over again. Almost every year, you hear about something where a firewall or router's taken over. Last year, a major manufacturer had backdoors into their systems for 8 months, and everybody could use it, right? So it's not unheard of for your firewall to be manipulated. They get on it, they see where your SIM is, right? Here's where you can use misinformation to be able to stop and detect a threat, right? So what's cool is you have your cloud up here. On the inside, you have a switch, right? So if I'm wanting to detect information from a firewall and I want to get legit information, oh, sorry, I guess I'm sharing the PowerPoint still. There we go. So basically firewall, SIM, switch, internet. If I want to get legit information that I have high fidelity of about what's happening, from a security standpoint, because I'm more concerned about communications, right? I already know that a firewall is not going to be able to detect everything going through it because it's just not built structurally to do that. There are some newer firewalls that have more processing power behind it, different chips and things like that, but they still have a limited capacity to investigate everything going through them. The other thing I know is that firewalls are only loaded, right, from some of our earlier conversations with the threat intel, right, that pertains to what's trending. So this firewall is only going to detect what's trending in the industry, and it's only going to detect what it's loaded with. So if there's something that's not trending or something that's not loaded with that's attacking you today, it's not going to see it, even if it has machine learning and things like that. So in a lot of cases, right? So what I want to do to get where I want to go create my own logs is I want to create a system that is on the outside and the inside, more of a collector in some ways, that's invisible. So whenever you're doing detection in your organization, your detection should never be coupled with a preventative device. So a lot of people do detection in their firewall. It's not very good because if someone takes over your firewall, well, now your detection is also taken over. Now, again, remember, you want to know yourself and know your enemy. You don't want them to know themselves and you, right? So you want to limit that a bit. So you want to collect here and here, multiple different types of technology to do that. Taps are a great way to go. If you do that, you want to make sure they fail open if their power's lost. You also want to deploy those in a redundant environment. So if you have firewalls, 2 of them or whatever, you want to make sure that anywhere traffic flows, this could be between routers, this could be a router here, it could be an MPLS router, it could be whatever in your environment. Anywhere data passes on one side or another of a device or through a doorway, you can put a tap in. You pull that information out, And what you're doing is you're collecting that information. You're creating those. What that does is this becomes invisible. Nobody can see it. No one can detect it. You can do it in such a way that it doesn't even slow this traffic down. So a threat actor can't see their traffic get slowed down and wonder what's slowing it down, right? So you start to create by getting them, right? You're going and making them yourselves off of what's happening here and here. Tells you what's happening on the outside of your firewall. Why is that important? Because your firewall is going to get attacked as well. You need to know what's happening on the outside, because if your firewall is attacked, it's not going to tell you it's attacked. On the inside, you want to do this as well, because you want to see traffic between your networks. You want to see all of that stuff and collect that information. And you can actually build a really cool map of what's happening from a communication standpoint, and it will give you information to stop threats. And it will also help you know yourself really, really well, and you can trust the data. If you're not doing something like this right now, the information you're using from a log standpoint is going to be limited because it can't collect everything. And two, it's very possible that it's not trustworthy, whether through human failure, human error, or a threat actor's manipulated it. Now, if you still want to have a SIM, that's great. More information is not bad. We love data. And so we love the fact that people export those off, but we use it as a secondary ancillary data source that we consider not trusted. And so what's cool is if you're doing this, you can now make this trusted. And this is why I said you can use it as a detection method, because if we see something happening here, we know it happened. We're guaranteed that it happened. And we know it's trustworthy because we collected it, right? And we went and got it. Now we can take information that was sent to us and compare it. And we can say, is it here and here? If yes, perfect. If it's manipulated in the SIM data, well, now we know a threat actor is doing something as well. So it's an additional source of detection, but not because the SIM data told us. It's because we matched it up to trustworthy information that we knew we could verify. And that is the key. So you want to start to deploy the ability to collect information inside your environment just like that. You know, make sure you have technology that just captures and just quietly does it. Now, here's the big thing. It has to be passive. Here's why. If I have an IP address right here, well, now a threat actor can attack the collection piece and can manipulate it. You want it to be completely out of band, right? You want to put it in place and you're just collecting information. That way, from the moment you put it in, you can verify it's trusted. And that's a really, really cool thing. Now, there are things around the fact that you need to protect the server, right? That is capturing that. But, and Vigilon actually has a lot of patents around just even how to verify this system, right? Now, if you're doing this on your own, you build a server out there or you go get a system, right? You're not going to have necessarily the protections to make sure that this box, where you're storing that information or the system that's connected to these is creating it. You need to make sure that this is heavily protected, right? But you still have a huge leg up on the fact of a SIM because you're collecting data out of band and independently of the system itself. I mean, just think about this. If a system is taken over by a threat, right? And you say, doing this way is like saying, hey, system, are you okay? Of course the threat actor is going to say, yeah, I'm fine, right? And that's that same mindset, right? You want to be able to say, hey, are you okay? And then know if it is or not independently. And if it says, yes, I'm all right, but it's not, then you can do something about that, right? So second, make sure that you know that logs you create are better than logs you receive. Now, any logs is better than no logs, right? But you want to make sure that the logs that you're creating logs in your organization that can give you information to protect yourself and not just rely on logs that you're receiving from things. And that's really important, especially when you have cloud technologies that are out there. Looks like there's a couple questions. Let me see if there's anything I need to address. Yeah, so Jay Thomas asked, would implementing a SIM help with 6 or other controls? No, I personally, I would not implement that as my fix for number 6. Now, is it a step down the path? Sure. But again, the moment you turn it on, you can't trust the information coming from it. And threat actors can manipulate you based off the information in the SIM. And they know that, right? They can send all kinds of stuff to a SIM and make you go do all kinds of other things because you're going to do it because you're going to trust your SIM. But when you realize that SIMs can't be trusted because the data they're receiving can't be trusted, that's a whole different story, right? So, you know, what you're basically doing is creating your own logs that help you make decisions and drive better usage of SIM technology, right? But I would put in something like this first, then that second, because that's just going to, you know, affect you down the road, but it's not trustworthy. So what I was basically just going to say here is that is to recap on the mindset within your organization, right? And security is all about knowing yourself, making decisions, but then also helping change mindset in your organization. Letting the people that need to make decisions understand what data you have and when it's useful and when it's not, right? So here, for instance, SIM, right? It's horrible to get into an incident response and have to then learn that SIMs aren't going to help you in the way that you think they are. Now, again, they're great technologies. If you have one, don't get rid of it. Any kind of data is good data, but do things differently. Don't trust it as primary means of detection. Build out the way to collect information in your environment. Like go find, if you're trying to find logging solutions, go find things that create logs, you know, instead of receive logs, right? But change that mindset in your organization. So as you're building that, we talked about in the very first one about building that internal security advisory board. And it should have literally someone from the lowest tier in your IT, right, to the next tier. You want a representative from someone in all of those levels. And you should have someone from your C-level there, and maybe even someone from your board there. And they should all get to know each other and learn how to talk with each other and understand each other and trust each other. Because if you have an incident, all of those people are going to have to be in a room one day, and they're going to have to learn how to talk during an incident. And that doesn't work very well, believe me. And so you want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So back to these little mindset moments, this is one of them, right? Make sure that you're classifying the tools you have and that everyone understands the effectiveness of them. And go back to that timeline of security. Make small incremental changes, right? By the time most companies deploy technologies in their organization, it's out of date and it's not worth anything, right? Security changes so fast and technology changes so fast. If it's taking you 6 to 9 months to deploy something in your environment, you got a whole lot of other things that you can do before that, before you do those things. What's cool is if you do the right things, then it buys you time to go deploy something really cool that you feel is cool, that you like, right? That wants to be deployed. But your organization doesn't have the time to wait for these behemoth things to come in, right? And by the time the behemoth thing is in, it's not effective as much as it used to be. So a couple things that you can do to start. One, watch the previous videos if you haven't, right? Really informative. We've had a lot of great feedback from them, and they've been helping organizations just start to walk down this path. Reach out to one of your, if you're a customer of ours, reach out to a CRS agent, right? We'll help you walk down that path too. And in most cases, you're already covered by most of these that we're talking about today, but it's important for you to know, like most of the CIS top 20 is covered just by having CyberDNA and managed endpoint in your environment, right? So, but it's important for you to know how those are covered, right? How it's covering you. So reach out, we'll talk to you about it. We're doing these webinars as a reach out from us to you as well. If you're not a customer of ours, check us out. We'll talk about that in a second. Implement the 3 MDM recommendations, right? Start with policy. That's a huge step, right? 2, make some changes to your internal authentication, or enable 2-factor auth on all your systems. Pretty simple. You can do those things pretty cheaply. Duo is a great one out there. DUO. Go check it out. It's not that expensive. You can implement it pretty quick. 3, do a security audit, right? With us. If you're not a customer of ours already, we'll give you those scripts to go ahead and start deploying Exchange out to your environment. If you are a customer of ours, reach out to your CRS agent. We'll get you that script. Last, implement out-of-band logs, like we were talking about. Focus on things that you create, not things that you receive, right? Next step, do those things. Come to the webinar in 2 weeks, right? And by the way, if you don't have the resources to do step 1, reach out to us. We do have the resources that can help you to deploy those, under different, statement of work or an agreement. We put together a package to help you start to implement some of those technologies. Reach out. We have a sister company, Vigilant Connect. They focus completely on helping companies just, carry out and secure themselves. Come to the webinar in 2 weeks. We're going to go through 7 and 6. We're going to jump to the next page into those foundational aspects of CIS Top 20, and we're going to go through 7 and 8. 3, review. If you're a customer of ours, go in to your portal and do a security and vulnerability report review. Just go in and look at it. It's right in your portal. It's on your reports. Click on it. Just go through. It's going to tell you a whole lot of information, things you can change today. If you don't understand the report or you want more information on it, that's totally cool. Reach out to a CRS agent. They would love to walk through it with you. They'll do that quarterly anyway. If you're not a customer of ours, do an audit. Just do an audit. It's free. You'll get more information than you'll get from any of the pen test or vulnerability assessments you do every year, and it's not going to cost you anything. And you'll get to see a lot of information you didn't have, and you get to see how we can help you as well. And then 4, create that internal security decision board. Really build that with people from each team. It's going to be a little awkward at first, especially for your senior levels, because they're not used to talking sometimes to the other positions that are at lower levels in the organization. It's gonna be awkward for the lower levels too, because they're not used to talking to your C-level. It might be even intimidating, but I can tell you, if you do it on this side of a security issue, you'll be able to stop issues much faster and not have them impact your business as much. It's worth the awkwardness, and it's worth going through building those relationships. We can help you with that, and we can help you work through that iterative decision-making inside your organization. It's what we do for our customers every single day, right? If you're not one, schedule that audit. Just reach out to our team. You can, Greg is, available on these all the time. You've received a link from us as well. You can reach out and go onto our website and at vigilantnow.com. You can click on try out Vigilant Now, and that'll lead you to a little form. You just fill it out, and you can get that free security audit. And some of you have been invited by other people that already have connection with us, maybe a sales agent or someone that's helping you from a decision-making standpoint. Reach out to them. They can get you connected to us as well. You have zero risk in it. Take you an hour of your time to be able to get a full security audit, of a location at your organization. So reach out. Thank you again for your time today. And really, I really enjoy these. Hope you do too. We'll see you in 2 weeks.